Hi, I'm Sara Levin, the Artful Inker, an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in the United States, and today I'm here with 3 cards using the Jar of Flowers stamp set. Let me set this aside and we'll get started. So I'm going to start with a simple stamping card using one of the note cards and envelopes from the note card and envelope pack. They come with 20 of each, and let me just make sure I'm even across the bottom and use my bone folder to finish the score line there. And then I want to bring in my stamps. So I'm going to start with the stems, and I'm going to ink in Old Olive. Now you could make your stems a different color if you choose. Let me just straighten up my card, and I'm going to stamp near the bottom but not at the bottom with these. And let's set those aside and put my ink out of the way. And then next I want my early espresso, and I'm going to stamp the jar. But I'm going to not ink the top couple of rings on the jar. So I'm going to line that up with the edge of the ink pad and just hold there. Give it a quick huff to make sure that my ink is still moist, and straighten up my card here and stamp around those stems. Okay, make sure I rub across all of the lines. And now my stems are in the jar. And then next I want to add my flowers, and I'm going to also stamp those in Early Espresso. So let's rub all over and pick up our ink, and then arrange the flowers here at the top of the jar. And by not stamping those last couple of rings, my flowers look like they're in the jar, and they're not competing with those rings for placement. So let's close up the Early Espresso. And finally I have the Pool Party ink and this kind of half jar stamp that's got the little lines in it, and I'm using the back of the stamp rather than the front. So I'm just inking that up, and then I'm going to bring that over here to add my water in the jar. Okay, so next we're going to do some coloring. We'll be coloring with the watercolor pencils assortment 1 and assortment 2. I've already pulled the pencils out that I want to use, and I'm going to start with the crushed curry here on my sunflowers. And let's just zoom this in a little bit, and then there's less chance that you'll be looking at the top of my head as I color. So I'm just going to color this one in and move on to another flower. So real easy, just use your pencil and hit all of the petals here. Okay, and then I'm going to use my real red pencil down on this flower right at the top of the jar, and you can color harder in areas to create some shading with the pencils, and then lighten up. And then I'm also going to color this little flower over here with the red, and these 3 little flowers up here with the red. Okay, and then I've got my Calypso Coral, and I'm going to color this little spiky flower here with the Calypso Coral. You'll notice I've pressed harder down this left edge and then lightened up for the rest. And then all of our leaves are going to get Old Olive. And here on this ferny bit, it doesn't matter that you're exactly, you just want to give it some color in there. Okay, and then let's do the center of one of our flowers here. And I'm going to use some Cajun craze in here to give it some color along with that early espresso ink that's already stamped there. So let me finish coloring these and I'll be right back for our next step. So we're all colored, but we need to add some additional detail. I've got my Wink of Stella here, and I'm going to use it to blend my colors here so that some of my lines aren't as sharp. And it will also help to make those colors a little more vibrant. I am brushing off on the side over here between colors so that you're not dragging say red into your crushed curry. And it just takes a quick little brush over these to get them to pop a little more. And then let's do our Old Olive here. Okay. And then finally, we're going to do a little bit of shading because we've got our jar here that's just sitting right out in the middle of the air. So just taking my basic gray and giving it a little bit of a very light scribble here for a shadow, so that it looks like it is sitting on something. Okay, and then finally I want a little bit of early espresso up here in my flowers. So I'm going to go along this outside edge of their center and darken it up just a little bit with the early espresso. And there we have our first jar of flowers. It's a simple stamping note card. Let me set this aside and we'll move on to the next one. For our second card, we're also going to start with the jar of flowers stamp set. And I've got a piece of basic white that is 2 5/8 by 4 1/4. And we're going to use the Old Olive ink pad and stamp our stems. Again, near the bottom. I didn't get my stamp fully inked, so I'm going to pick up a spot there in the middle. So I want it near the bottom, but not at the bottom. And then let's close this up and add our jar with early espresso. And again, I'm going to line this up so that I'm not inking the top 2 rings of the jar, and give this a huff. And that is the early espresso again. And I'm bringing that top line right to the top of the stems, so there's no break in where they appear to be. And then let's ink those sunflowers again. Give that a rub all over so all those fine lines pick up ink. Not sure they did in the center. There we go. And then set this right near the top of our jar. It looks like I have stamped too high, so I'm going to turn this over and start again. So let's grab this out and start with our stems and come a little closer to the bottom. We do want our flowers to be totally on there. And grab our jar, and again you're going to line up so that the top two lines aren't on the ink pad. And bring this down. Okay, and then finally let's ink these again, because I'm sure that ink that I put on before has dried. And now we are right on the edge, which is right where I want to be. Okay, and then let's put this out of the way and bring in our pool party and add the water. And I'm using the back of the stamp again to fill in with the water. Okay. And then this time we're going to color with Stampin Blends. I'm going to start with my Mango Melody and Old Olive, and let's just zoom in here a little bit. And down here on the stems, I'm going to do light Old Olive on the section that's in the water. And then I'm going to blend a bit for the section above the water. And I'm just lightly stroking in some of that dark with the bullet, and then I'm going to go over some of the areas as they come down and meet these stems in the water with my light Old Olive. Okay, so we're done with the Old Olive for a moment, and we're going to use the bullet tips on our Mango Melody. And I'm just going to start around the center of these flowers. Now, you could take a lot more time with your coloring than I'm going to on these. And these petals that are in the back, I'm going to color completely with the dark dark Mango Melody, and then just come back through with the light and starting at the center, blending that all the way out. Now you can start with a larger piece of the basic white and then cut it down at the top, which makes the placement a little more forgiving. Okay, and then let's color our flower over here with our Poppy Parade this time, and I'm going to use the bullet tips on these, and starting with the dark in the center, and then bring that out with the light Poppy Parade. And I'm just going to color around that center again to get that color to blend. And again, I'm using the dark over here, and then I'm going to give it a pop at the top of each one of these with the light Poppy Parade. Okay, and that's all of those colored. And then let's grab our Calypso Coral in the dark and light. And we're going to add that back here on this little spiky flower. And then I'm going to blend out from that dark with the Calypso Coral. And that gives that a nice little bit of shading, and it's easy just to follow the shading lines that are in the stamp. And then of course we need to hit all of our greens around, and that's going to be a combination of the dark and light old olive. So just touching in the dark and then filling in with the light so you get a little bit of shading, and again just dotting in and then filling the rest of the way. And this one I'm just going to completely do with the light, and then do some dark here and bring it up. Okay, so you get the idea for all of those. Let's cap these and let's do the center of our flower here. So I've got my light cinnamon cider, and I'm going to just kind of scribble in a little bit with it and leave some light spots. And then I've got my light soft suede, and I'm just going to touch in those light spots with, so you get some shading on that. Okay, so I'm going to finish these last couple of flowers and the leaves, and I'll be right back. So now that this is colored, we need to do some shading, and I've got my dark balmy blue here in the bullet tip, and I'm going to basically just lightly trace around all of these pieces out here along the edge, and I'm not trying to get a hard straight line. And I'm going to stop there and take my bullet tip from my color lifter and just color over that to help soften it just a little bit. And then I'm going to continue on around and make another stop in just a moment. And I'm trying to color out with my color lifter so that I'm not pushing that color back into my flowers. And I'm leaving it dark down between the leaves because our shading would be darker down there anyway. Okay, and then let's just come on around the outside edges, not going down in between the leaves. Oops. And let's soften this on around. And again, pulling out rather than pushing it towards my sunflowers. just going to dot some of this in between our flowers here. And then I'm going to come over this with this to give it a little lighten there, and same thing around this edge where I haven't hit before. So that gives that a little bit of shading around. And then finally we need a little shadow down here at the bottom, and I'm going to use that Stampin Blends technique that you all see me use a lot. So I've got my dark basic gray and the brush tip on my color lifter, and I'm going to start in close, and our shadow will be darker close to our jar, and then lighten up as we get out from our jar. So trying to run my pen out, and then just brush your pen out on the side to take that dark ink out. So I'm done with the coloring. Let's zoom out. Whoops, a little too far. And let's put our card together. So I've got a crumb cake base that is cut 4 1/4 by 11 and scored at 5 1/2, and a basic white insert. So let's go ahead and put that down. And I'm just adhering that with multi-purpose glue, my favorite adhesive for card making. Let's give that a little bit of a twist. Okay, and then I've got a piece of the pool party here, and a piece of the let me think, Good Taste designer paper. And this piece is cut at 3 15/16 by 5 3/16, and the pool party is cut at 4 1/16 by 5 5/16. So you still get nice amount of border on here. And let's see, I want to add my piece of pattern play, no, that's pattern party designer paper, and this is cut at 1 1/2 by 3 15/16. Now the pattern party designer paper is a Hostess product, and there are 48 pieces of designer paper in that pack, which I think is just awesome. And I've got about 24 inches of linen thread here. Normally I don't cut my thread before tying, or my ribbon before tying, but I have this time. Let's readjust that. I want a double loop around here, and let's push these together a little bit. And then I'm tying an off-center bow. Oops. Well, that's if I loop it around, I am. Okay. And then let's pull this off to the side just a little bit more and tie my bow. And before I spend much time adjusting this, I'm going to go ahead and add dimensionals to the back and put my layers together. And I'm going to use dimensionals on either side of this to kind of keep it in place, but also to support my layer. But that way my linen thread won't be moving all over my card. Okay, and almost done. Let's straighten this up on the grid paper, and here we go. And then let's add dimensionals to the back of this, and see, nobody knows that we stamped a second time, flipped our paper over and started again. The beauty of two sides. And oops, one more. Nope, that's off. Okay, and then let's slide this right in next to this bow, making sure that my card is still straight and we are centered more or less. And there's our card using Jar of Flowers, card number 2. Let me clean up, and I've got a third variation for you. For the third card, we'll be using the Jar of Flowers bundle, which is the stamp set we've been using, and then the jar punch. So let me set these out of the way for the moment and bring in some basic white cardstock, and we're going to start similarly to what we've done before. So I'm inking my stems in Old Olive. And then let's ink the jar in Early Espresso. And this time I'm not worried about whether I get a part of a jar or a full jar. And we do want to make sure our stems are inside the jar. Okay. And then I'm going to stamp flowers. And I want 2 sets of these flowers. So let's stamp here. And let's turn our cardstock and stamp a little. I don't need everything at the top for the second one. I just need a couple of these flowers, so it's okay if I'm off the edge. Okay, let's put that out of the way. And then let's bring in my Old Olive, and we're going to color our stems in and do the same thing we've done before. Just trying to find all of my pieces here. And then I'm going to touch some of these with the dark Old Olive as they cross over and around. You get a little bit of shading on those stems. And then let's just blend that out a little bit with our light so that it's not such a hard line where we've put that. Okay, so that's it for the coloring for just a moment, because we need to bring in our pool party. And I could color at this point with my Stampin Blends down here for the water, but I'm happy using the back of the stamp for my water line here. Okay, and that's it for the stamping. Now let's work on some of this colorings. And so I want to zoom in for that and grab my Stampin' Blends. I'm going to start with Mango Melody and the Poppy Parade. So using the same color palette that I used before, and going around with my dark Mango Melody. And by coloring about halfway up these petals, you create the look of a curve. And that's about where the lines on the petals end that are in the stamp. So I'm just coloring these back petals with the dark Mango Melody. We're not going to shade them at all. Okay, and then just pull up all the way around. Or if you pull down, the top of the petal will be even lighter. Okay, so let's cap these and add our Poppy Parade. And I want the bullet tips. I'm using bullet tips because our area to color is so small. So again, I'm going to color in with the dark here in the center and pull out with the light Poppy Parade. And the reason I'm not coloring all the way to the ends is because I see some shading opportunities. So, and since this is our more stepped up card, I'm going to pay attention to those shading opportunities. And then just come in here again, bring this down so it's not a hard line where we've just added the shading in, and it makes that flower a little more interesting. So let's go in with the dark here on each one of these. I've tried to keep the color palette fairly narrow on these 3 cards so that you get a similar but different look. Okay, and then we'll use the Calypso Coral. This makes me think of I think the flower is called a protea, and I don't know that it ever comes in something like Calypso Coral, but that's a color that worked with a shade that worked with the others that I was using for this creation. Okay, and let's cap these up and do a quick look at our leaves. So it's going to be the dark and light old olive. So shading down in here with the dark and then pulling up with the light. And then for the smaller leaves, I like to just touch in a little bit of the dark and then come back and just color over with the light. Okay, so that's a look at the leaves, and then let's do the centers of our flowers. So I've got my light cinnamon cider, and I'm just going to kind of scribble this in a little bit, and then where I have left light spots, I'm going to use my light soft suede, and then I want to create a shadow here, and then I'm going to color over that and blend a little bit with the light cinnamon cider. Okay, so I'm going to finish all of this coloring and I'll be right back. Okay, so our pieces are colored, but I do want to add a little shading to this one. And I'm going to use my dark balmy blue and my color lifter. And I'm just going to touch in between some of the flowers here. And as we get out to the outside edge, I'm going to blend that just a little bit. And down in here. And this just adds a little depth in that arrangement. And this, just want a little shading out along this edge, but we're not going to do the full outline like we did before. Okay, so that just gives that a little more dimension. And then let's bring in our jar punch. And we're going to cut out our jar. My piece is just a tad long, or I stamped a little too far up, so we're going to cut this off so that it easily fits down into the punch. Well, Sarah. There we go. Okay, so this leaves a little bit of a border all the way around our jar. And then we're going to bring those paper snips back in and cut our flowers off of our cardstock piece here and use them to cut all the way around this little bouquet. Now, you're going to let the paper do the work for you. You're not moving the scissors. I don't know if you can tell that my scissor hand is primarily staying motionless, and I'm just turning my paper in here, and the scissors are just barely closing. I don't have my paper all the way up at the tip of my scissors. I find it easier to control with them, the paper further back in. Okay, and cut pieces away so that you're not fighting it. And just give this a little wiggle along this edge so it has a little bit of shape. You don't have to be trying to cut exactly to those little red flowers. Now you could leave a little border around this if you wanted to, a little white border. Sometimes a white border will help your piece that you're cutting pop a little more on the final project, so that's not a bad plan. And we're only cutting part way into between those leaves. And we're almost done with this. Okay. You can let me know in the comments below which one of these 3 cards is your favorite for making. Okay, and then we've got these couple extra flowers that I colored, and we're going to cut them off here. So let me turn the camera off as I finish, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so we've got our bouquet and then our 2 extra sunflowers cut out. And next I want my jar and the linen thread. And I'm just going to tie a bow around the top of my jar. And then let's trim this. I'm going to let those hang longer for the time being. And let me grab my take your pick and my mini glue dots. And let's add a glue dot here on the back to keep my linen thread from moving around. Looking to see, up, it's still on my take your pick tool. I didn't think it was down. There we go. And just roll my linen thread right into that. Okay, so next we need to begin to put our card together. So I've got crumb cake base again, 4 1/4 by 11, scored at 5 1/2, and a piece of basic white for the inside, and my multi-purpose glue. Let's move that up just a bit and center our panel. And then I've got a piece of Pool Party, a piece of Early Espresso, a piece of In Good Taste designer paper, and a piece of Pattern Party designer paper. So let's layer these two together. The Pool Party is 4 1/16 by 5 3/16, and the Early Espresso is 3 15/16 by 5 1/16. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and adhere my designer paper, the In Good Taste. This can be found in the annual catalog. Of course, you can find a link to my store in the description below. And if you're in the US, I appreciate if you do part of your shopping for Stampin' Up! Products in my store. So this In Good Taste designer paper is cut at 3 7/8 by, let me think, I think it's by 5. Is that correct? Okay, so let's add this to our card and center that. And then our Pattern Party is one of the host products. When you host a party or purchase $150 worth of product, you can choose this designer paper pack with your rewards, and you get 48 pieces of designer paper, which is awesome. And the patterns are really great and versatile. So let's put this layer down. And then next I've used the stitched rectangle dies, and I'm holding them together with washi. And I've cut a piece of crumb cake and a piece of Night of Navy, so I get 2 border pieces. So let's turn those over, and I'm just going to add a little bit of multi-purpose glue just along the edges here. I'm not going to worry about holding the whole frame down. Okay, and I'm going to put my Night of Navy down first. Let's straighten this up. And then I'm going to put my crumb cake in here. Okay, and then next I need my jar. And we're going to double the dimensionals at the bottom. Okay. And that way it sits even. And then let's put our flowers on. So I need a dimensional here at the top, and then we're going to double some of these pieces that are out along the edge. And let me see here. Okay, so we're going to push this up just a little bit, and I've got a single here, and then I'm going to pull in a mini for the top half of this, because this is going to be sitting partially on the paper and partially off. Okay, pull all of my backing pieces off. Okay, and then let's put this flower on first, and we're going to use a couple of dimensionals behind it to give it plenty of support and give our bouquet here a little bit of dimension. Now I've turned this just a little bit so that it doesn't line up perfectly, and that way it's going to give even more dimension than just the dimensionals by doing that. Oop. Okay. And I am going to triple this because I want this flower to be out in front of all of the flowers. So let's turn it just a little bit. That might have been one too high. So let's pull one off. Okay. Sticky dimensionals sticking to my fingers. And we're going to stick with doubling these. Okay. And I do want to overlap this to this one. There we go. A double is better than a triple. And there is our last of our stepped up cards using Jar of Flowers. Thanks for stopping in today. If you're shopping for Stampin' Up! Products, I appreciate if you do part of your shopping in my Stampin' Up! Store. There's a link for that in the description below. You can give this video a thumbs up and share it with your card making friends. And of course, if you subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the bell, you'll be notified the next time I upload a video. Have a great day. Bye.